This is Unit 4, Systems of Equations and Inequalities. This is the first day of the unit, and we're talking about solving systems of linear equations graphically. It's one of the three methods of solving we are going to use. So today, our objective is to be able to graph two lines on the same coordinate plane, find where they intersect, and state the intersection point. That is actually the solution. It's really important. If you don't state what the coordinates are, you have not answered the question. So the first step in doing this is making sure both of your equations are in y equals mx plus b form. That lets you graph it because you have your slope and you have your y-intercept. You're going to graph both lines and plot as many points as you can here. The solution is the intersection of the two lines. So y equals mx plus b form for both equations, graph them using the slope and the y-intercept, and then figure out where the two lines cross, if they cross at all. So we're going to jump right into an example here. Find the solution of the following system of equations. And our first one is f of x equals x minus 1. The second one is g of x equals negative x plus 3. If you remember from the last unit, we said that f of x, this part right here, is actually the exact same thing as y equals. And if you have g of x, this part right here, that's the exact same thing as y equals also. So these are already both in y equals mx plus b format. The first one, our f of x function, our slope is going to be 1. If we write it as a fraction, that's 1 over 1. And our y-intercept is going to be negative 1, or the point 0, negative 1. So if we graph that, we're going to start at 0, negative 1, and we're going to go up 1, right 1, and we're going to graph a whole bunch of points here. And then we are going to use that to connect our line through. Oops, that was a bad line. We have arrows on the end, and we can label this f of x. Then we can graph our second function, which in this case has a slope of negative 1 over 1 and a y-intercept of 3, or the point 0, 3. So I'm going to start at 0, 3. And I'm going to go down 1, right 1. I'm going to graph a whole bunch of points. I'm going to use a straight edge to connect my points, making sure I put arrows on the end, and I label this one g of x. Now, the important part here is figuring out what the solution is. So we look and we want to find where along those lines do they intersect. So this point right here. So we need to figure out what are the coordinates of this point right here. And in this case, it is the point forward 2, up 1. So the point 2, 1 is our solution. If you do not state that, you have not answered the question. Yes, you did a great job graphing both of them, but you did not find the solution. You have to state the coordinates. I can't stress that enough. So let's jump to example number 2 here. And why don't you pause the video at this point, make sure they're both solved for y equals mx plus b, graph them, and find the solution. Okay, so looking at this one here, we want to solve the second equation there. We need to solve it for y equals. So I'm going to subtract 7x and then divide both sides by 7. Remember, it'll cancel on this side. On the other side, you're going to need to divide both pieces. So you'll end up with y equals negative x plus 2, or negative 1x plus 2. So from there, Our slope is going to be negative 1 over 1. Our y-intercept is 2, or the point 0.02. The first equation is already solved for y equals mx plus b. So we know that our slope is going to be negative 2 over 1. Our y-intercept is going to be 3, or the point 0.03. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to graph both of those, making sure I put arrows and label. I'm going to graph the second one, arrows and label. And it's going to be super important here that I state the coordinates of the intersection here. So in this case it is the point 1, 1. Okay, if we turn the page, we can look at example number 3. Now, it's going to be kind of difficult to solve the second one here for y equals because there's no y in it. So we're just going to end up graphing both of these. So our first one, y equals 3, that means we're going to go to 3 on the y-axis, and we're going to draw a line right through there, making sure we put arrows and we label y equals 3. The second one, x equals negative 5, that's going to be a vertical line at negative 5. So I go back here to negative 5, and I'm going to draw a vertical line, making sure I put arrows, and I label this as x equals negative 5. And I still need to state the coordinates of that intersection point there, which in this case are the points negative 5, 3. So that one's a little trickier because there's no slope or y-intercept for those. So you have a horizontal or vertical line, and you want to find out where they cross. Jumping to number 4. Why don't you pause the video here for a second and solve those for y equals mx plus b, graph them, and find the point of intersection. So pause the video now. So if you solve the first one for y equals, you should end up with y equals 1/2 x plus 4. So our slope is 1/2. Our y-intercept is 0.4. If you solve the second one, all you have to do is divide by 4 there. You should end up with y equals 1/2 x minus 4. So your slope is again 1/2, and your y-intercept is negative 4 this time. When you graph them, making sure you put arrows and label, you should get a graph that looks something like this. Now this is unique because our slopes for both of them are exactly the same. So these are what you call parallel lines. And parallel lines, as you probably know by definition, never intersect. So if you have two equations that have the same slope, they actually have no solution. So if you jump straight down from that problem, when two lines have the same slope, they are called parallel. And when they have no solutions, the lines have the same slope.
Morning.
Morning. So let's go to the last question here. Number 5. Pause the video, give it a try, and resume when you are ready to see the solution. So the last one here, you're going to solve your equation for y equals. You should end up with y equals 2/3 x plus 1, so your slope is 2/3, your y-intercept is 1. And you're going to go ahead and graph that, making sure you label. The second equation is going to be a vertical line straight through 3. Again, making sure you have arrows and you label. And we need to find the coordinates of that intersection point, which are the point 3, 3. So hopefully this gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on. If you have questions, you can make sure to ask them of your teacher in class. Other than that, have a fantastic day. We'll see you soon.